Well, 4 years ago, I was elected as your sheriff, and I was very, very proud of that, to be able to enter a great organization during some very troubled times. I had the opportunity to sit on the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence and saw firsthand the organization's challenges, what needed to be done, and to be able to come in and do a transformation on an agency using the people within the organization, the strength of the organization, those with experience from within, and I was able to do that. A tremendous amount has been achieved in these past 4 years during a tough social climate across this nation, with some difficult legislative mandates, all very well intentioned, but with some serious unintended consequences that we've been dealing with since. It's been a tough period in other ways as well, with the mass shootings we've seen across the country, acts of terrorism, and particularly troubling those hitting our schools. We have worked hard on our youth programs. We want to be able to address our youth as young as we possibly can, to be able to help them get on the right track, to be able to foster literacy after-school programs, and we've done that in the Sheriff's Youth Foundation. We've dealt with human trafficking. We set up a bureau in November of 2015 and had incredible results since that time and become a national model on that front. Our counterterrorism capabilities are a model for other organizations across the country. Our reputation has been restored amongst other law enforcement organizations, as well as the very communities that we serve. And then enough can't be said about the work that's been done by our men and women who work in the custody environment, our jails, and the transformation that's been accomplished there to be able to take it from where it was to where it is today. Some tremendous comments from our monitor team who oversees that progress, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Our mentally ill population in the custody environment has gone up 49% in the last 5 years. That's now 31% of our total in-custody population. A tremendously challenging population, one in need. It has made the L.A. County Jail the largest mental health institution in America, if not the world, and we shouldn't be one at all.
Sheriff, I'm going to break it there because we've gone past your 2-minute opening.
Perfect. Great.
And Lieutenant, I'm going to give you a couple extra seconds too. The clock is down here on the floor, and if you guys can keep, every once in a while, take a gander. Okay, your turn.
Thank you, Adrian.
And your mic is going to need to just touch it up. There you go.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for Marcel, Marjorie, and Brian for hosting and sitting on this panel. And I want to thank my family, friends, and the public for the opportunity to address my candidacy in this forum. And I think it's an idea as a long time has come, and we're finally here. I'm not a politician. I said that from the very beginning, and I initiated this campaign with the support of my wife, Vivian, way back in June of last year, and we wrote 3 words on a piece of paper, and that was our guide: reform, rebuild, restore. We stuck to those throughout the entire elections, all the way through the primary, and it turns out those are the exact 3 things that the Sheriff's Department and the community needs. We need to reform the Sheriff's Department. We're still in the same boat. In fact, we're in worse shape than we are today than we were in 2016, if that's possible. That's where we are. This election is going to be about reality versus what my opponent is claiming is all these wonderful transformations that people within the department are unaware of, and most members of the community are also unaware of these transformations. This is about rebuilding the organization from the ground up. And this is about restoring that trust that has been lost and has eroded over time in all the communities that we serve and the department, and together within the department, the trust between the line staff, supervisors, management, and command staff. We can reform the organization, we can change it, and in doing so, we're going to have an opportunity to actually address critical reform in the entire criminal justice system here in Southern California, because the Sheriff's Department forms a big linchpin of the criminal justice system, and our roles should not be underplayed. We can do this with your help, and this is about bringing everybody together. This is about unifying people behind a common cause, and that is reform the Sheriff's Department, and to this end, I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
All right, those were your opening statements, and now we're going to go to the panel questions, and first up is Marcel. Your question is for Sheriff McDonnell.
Thank you, Adrian. Sheriff McDonnell, there has been an ongoing staffing shortage at the Sheriff's Department for some time. How will you address these ongoing shortages to ensure our contract cities are receiving adequate levels of service and staffing to prevent deputy burnout? Please provide specific details on how the department intends to address this ongoing issue.
Thank you. It certainly has been a challenge here and across America in agencies' ability to be able to recruit the best and brightest. We have high standards for every 100 people who sign up to take the test to become deputy sheriffs. 4 make it to the academy, 3 make it through the academy. In spite of that, since I've been sheriff, we've hired over 2,200 deputy sheriff trainees, and that's since 2015. We currently have 236 in the academy today. When you compare that back to 2010, we hired 1 that year. 2011, we hired 120. So we're averaging 618 recruits now a year. So we are making some progress. I inherited 500 vacancies. There's been 500 vacancies since 2011. So we didn't start off flush once we came in. In 2017, we hired 593 deputy sheriff trainees, but that took almost 15,000 applicants to be able to get us there. So we are moving forward. We are an organization that people are now looking to much more favorably than previously. When people came into this organization a few short years ago, they could expect to do 6 to 8 years in the custody environment before being able to get out to patrol or some other function. Today we have people leaving the jail in as little as a year. And so that has changed dramatically in a relatively short period of time, which is a recruitment enticement. But we're also working with our communities. We're working with others out there. We're working with the Board of Supervisors to be able to right-size our budget, to be able to hire the number of people we need to be ultimately able to staff the many, many needs we have throughout the organization and to take care of the contract cities the way you deserve as well.
Now, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
When I talked about being divorced from reality, that is a prime example right now. Last year, we lost 100 deputies, and that is 100 less than what we started with. This year, as of June of this year alone, we're 100 down more. We're at an even greater pace than we were last year. The chief problem in the recruitment of the department is the man standing to my left right here. His name is Jim McDonnell. We need to turn this organization around. We need to encourage people to join on, and that's by actually hiring people instead of bragging about firing them.
All right, and we got 15 seconds if you'd like, Sheriff.
Yeah, you know what? You've been here 32 years. What have you done to be able to move the organization forward, to be able to help increase recruitment and put us on track? You talk about what's being done now. You've been in the organization. You didn't step forward, raise your hand, and say, hey, let me help.
All right, we're going to ask you, hold applause. All right, going to go on now to Marjorie. Your question starts with Lieutenant Villanueva.
For Lieutenant.
Yes.
Lieutenant, your campaign indicates that you're interested in reforming the LASD, both in terms of community policing and ethical standards of conduct. Can you lay out your vision of community policing? How would you determine what ethical standards of conduct you would seek to enforce, and how you would sanction a deputy who is out of policy? Since you stated that use of force rules are unclear, who would you like to see involved in their clarification?
That's a big question for 90 seconds, but I'll give my best shot at it. First of all, ethical standards of conduct, we have to delineate between mistakes of the mind and mistakes of the heart. Someone who acts maliciously and does something that violates policy, harms individuals, causes harm to the organization, to the community, lawsuits, all those things of that nature, that is going to get the serious end of discipline. It could be including termination. If there's a criminal matter and criminal prosecution, we will pursue that. However, if it's a mistake of the mind, a tactical mistake, a mistake for lack of training, which we're not getting right now, then that's not something that should be met with a harsh hand of discipline, because that is a disincentive for people to actually perform. What it's doing is causing a lot of deputies to just put their hands in their pockets and say, I'm not going to stick my neck out. I'm not going to do proactive policing because all I'm doing is rolling the dice and jeopardizing the financial welfare of my family. That's just not smart management. We can do a lot better than that. When it comes to ethical standards for the organization as a whole, I don't believe that Paul Tanaka's foot soldiers should be my command staff. I will not do that. I'm going to make sure that my command staff is thoroughly vetted and conforms to the highest standards possible for the organization. It has a history of ethical standards and supporting the overall mission of the department without cronyism, nepotism, tokenism, and all the things that really darken the organization over the years. There is so much we can do that is not happening right now, and I will make that happen.
Sheriff, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. We do have very high standards because what we do is critically important to the public that we serve. They expect when they call 911, people are going to show up who are competent, who have character, and who have compassion. And our deputies across the board demonstrate those qualities each and every day. Our deputies, unlike what has been characterized, do not put their hands in their pocket, are not pulling back from proactive police work. Crime is trending down. 2017, we were down in every crime category except burglary, which was flat. This year, the trend is going in the same direction. It just got the crime stats today, and we're down fairly significantly in both property and violent crime. So when you look at...
Sheriff, your time.
Thank you.
All right, we'll come back around to it again.
I'd like
All
to
right,
make a quick rebuttal on that regarding the 15 seconds.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and regarding crime stats, the first 3 years, 2015, 16, and 17, 9% increase in violent crime, Part 1 crimes. That's statistics from Mr. McDonnell's own statisticians.
All right, we're moving on to our next question. Brian, yours is for the Sheriff McDonnell.
Sheriff McDonnell, as you know, POPA conducted a morale survey of its 9,000 members, most of whom work in the Sheriff's Department. The results of that survey indicate that morale has decreased in the past few years. Do you believe morale is low in the Sheriff's Department? If so, what are you doing as Sheriff to improve morale? If not, why do you believe the employee survey paints a different picture?
Thank you. Morale is certainly a very critical issue for me. It's the perception of our deputies who are out there, our employees across the organization who are out there doing the great job that they're doing every day. When you look at morale in any police agency in America today, I think you'll find issues. We're in a tough part of American policing history right now. But when I look at the men and women who are doing the job, and you look at their performance, and you look at arrests are up in some of our more challenging areas, you look at the measures of success across the board, and they're doing the job in a tremendous fashion, being a model for policing in many of our specialties. So I'm very proud of what they're doing every day. We could all, take a step back and say, oh, things could be better. We're trying to make things better every day. 4 years ago when I got here, things were very difficult. We all worked together. I didn't do it alone. We all worked together to be able to get us where we are today. Forbes magazine came out last month and made an announcement that the LA County Sheriff's Department was one of the top 500 large employers in America to work for. The only police agency represented in that 500-person or 500 company survey. So that was something that was unsolicited, something that is, has nothing to do with the department, an unbiased third-party observation, but one that I think we should be very proud of because it states something that is hard to be able to, you can't buy that, hard to be able to achieve something like that, and yet here we are. We're always going to be critical of ourselves, knowing that we can be better and wanting the working conditions for all of our people to be the very best that they can.
And that's your time. We'll have a 30-second response.
Another example of being divorced from reality. That Forbes ranking, so to speak, apparently they just interviewed the command staff of the Sheriff's Department. They didn't bother with the line staff or the community. I think the results would have been far different. If you go to the building where employees file for their paperwork for retirement, the line sometimes goes out the door and around the building. That's what the morale is, and that's reality.
15 seconds, Sheriff.
Yeah, we every year between 350 and 400 people put in their papers to retire. Predictably, that happens most frequently in March due to the way the budget packages and benefit packages are crafted. And so that's not something unpredictable. In fact, the number this year was less than prior years. So, you can twist things the way you want to be able to twist them to say what you want to say. But I think if you were to go out and talk to the vast majority of our hardworking deputies and staff, they would tell you that they're very proud to be members of this organization.
All right, time's up. The next question for me, for Lieutenant Villanueva, this is, how will you reconcile the nation's biggest jail system with immigration policy under the Trump administration's directives for ICE and SB 54, California's sanctuary state law?
Actually, the legislature and through the leadership of Kevin De Leon, they already reconciled that in a sense. SB 54 strikes a very careful balance between the needs of separating those who are already convicted felons of serious crimes that pose a threat to the community from those who are merely in and out of the jail for misdemeanor crime, traffic wars, and things who are not a threat to the community. We cannot do anything to support ICE in terms of being any arm of their enforcement. Our operation is exclusively local law enforcement, and ICE is going to do their business with enforcing immigration laws, and there's going to be a very bright line between the two. I will not allow the county jail to be a pipeline for deportation, And SB 54 strikes that careful balance. The same SB 54 that my opponent undermined from the very beginning, and did so in such a fashion that some of the people that are now protesting outside this building right now, it concerned them, and that is about trust. The position of sheriff is a position of trust. We have a very large undocumented population in Los Angeles County, the largest in the entire country, as a matter of fact. And because of the efforts of the Trump administration with ICE and deportations, all the language used caused a lot of people to just not call the police for very serious crimes. And that is study after study has shown that reportable crimes, very serious ones, are not being reported. And that is where Mr. McDonnell needs to take a step back and realize his role is not to be supporting the policy of the Trump administration, but to protect the residents of Los Angeles County.
Time. And hold your applause. Sheriff, 30 seconds on the clock for your
Thank you very much. That's an interesting perspective. Senate Bill 54 is put forth by Senator De Leon. We worked with Kevin and his staff to be able to craft a bill that met the needs of both public trust and public safety in Los Angeles County. We worked with the governor and the governor's staff to be able to end up with what was officially signed off as the final law that resulted from Senate Bill 54. And what we tried to do is to be able to get that balance, to be able to thank you. That is correct. And ma'am, that is not to respond to audience questions. Could I have a little extra time? When we talk about,
But the audience question has to stop there.
when we talk
If you
about,
want a response. Otherwise, you're grandstanding, and that's got to stop. Okay, you asked your question. Sheriff was polite enough. Give him a chance to answer. Okay. Okay.
The law, Senate Bill 54 dictates
Okay,
very clearly.
Sheriff, I'm going to ask you to please hold. Let's stop the clock. We said it was a debate, not a didactic debate, so. Okay. 30 seconds is back on the clock for you,
Thank you.
Sheriff, to respond on ICE and SB 54.
Thank you very much. As I was talking, Senate Bill 54, we helped shape that. What ultimately was signed by Governor Brown is what we were doing here in Los Angeles County for the most part all along. We do not stop people on the street. We do not ask people what their immigration status is. That is not our role. That is the role of the federal government. We do, as the law dictates, allow ICE into the jail only for those people who are convicted, not pretrial, and only for those convicted of crimes delineated by state law. We do that. We're required to do that. She spoke about the numbers of people, 1,000 out of 116,000 plus people who were released from our custody last year. That trended from 1.5% last year who were released to ICE down to 0.63 this year.
That's your 30. And,
Thank you.
Lieutenant, you got 15 seconds.
15?
Oh, wait, no, that was, you have 15 to rebut that.
It was his question initially. No, it was mine. Okay.
Yeah, no, it
Sorry.
was your question. Yeah, I know, there was a bit of an interruption there. Yeah, so this is your 15.
Well, instead of shaping perceptions, which Mr. McDonnell did very, very well, that is what has generated all the assumption, and a lot of it is very correct among the immigrant communities within Los Angeles County that he is very against immigration and very pro-ICE. And they have a role, and we have to strike that careful balance, but what he did, instead of just picking up the phone, doing it quietly, he made a very public grandstanding on SB 54, and that is why we have the problem we have today.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. That was, okay, Marcel, your question is now for Sheriff McDonnell.
Okay, Sheriff. One benefit of the contract model is reduced overall law enforcement costs. In recent years, cities have seen liability costs skyrocket. What steps have you taken to reduce risk within the department, and what do you intend to do to reduce risk going forward to minimize liability costs?
No, thank you. We have reduced in the past 4 years, we have reduced our cost as it relates to deputy-involved shootings as it relates to uses of force dramatically, and we've been in touch with your organization on that every step of the way, working hand in hand. We will continue to work together with you. We put together training programs, risk management programs. We evaluate after every significant incident. We break it down into its smallest parts to see what could have been done different and how do we then incorporate training into making that happen. We take risk management very seriously, and our liability issues have decreased. Certainly, as you're well aware, the issues we're dealing with today happened sometimes 4, 5, and 6 years ago. So in the pipeline now, we're going to see improvements in that whole issue. Our deputy-involved shootings, which are some of our most costly litigation issues, are down. Our uses of force, significant uses of force, are down, particularly in the custody environment. So we're on the right track. We've taken remedial action and working together with contract cities. We're very proud of the work that's being done, but it's never something where we feel comfortable in checking the box. We're going to continue to move forward and try and be better and better each and every day.
Lieutenant, 15 seconds. Excuse me, 30 seconds.
Well, again, we're being divorced from reality. If you ask the average deputy on the street, they're walking around in eggshells, afraid to make decisions, because now the new model under the current sheriff is don't make any decision, wait for a supervisor. It's a model that they're doing in custody, they're replicating in patrol as they gravitate from custody for patrol, and that is a disaster that is going to be unfolding over time, because you're going to have deputies getting way over their head, and they fail to make critical, assertive decisions in the field that they should have done, but they were trained poorly to do.
Sheriff, you've got 15 seconds.
Yeah, if you're saying deputies are way over their head and they don't ask for supervision, then you're inconsistent in that. The supervision is there to be able to assist them, to ensure that things are being done according to training, according to policy, and being able to provide the mentoring necessary to be able to help all of our people do the job as safely and as well for the public as they can.
All right, Marjorie, your question is for Lieutenant Villanueva.
Lieutenant, the role of the Civilian Oversight Commission is very important in terms of fostering trust between the department and the communities it serves. What would you like to see as its role in informing department policies and practices? What is your opinion about subpoena power for the Civilian Oversight Commission?
I said this in the very beginning. I believe the Civilian Oversight Commission is extremely important in assisting me in making informed policy decisions. I want them to be partners. I want them to be representative of the stakeholders in the community. So when we gather together, figure out what we need to do and move forward as a community together, then the decisions that I make are going to be respected and be backed by that Civilian Oversight Commission. And regarding the subpoena control, I'm going to actually empower them to receive all the documentation that they can legally obtain, and I'm going to give it to them. I'm not going to hide behind my position as sheriff. I'm not going to conceal information, and I'm not going to force them to go out there and get a ballot measure to do something that should have been done just from his own office. So you want some information? Here it is.
Sheriff, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, and that's exactly what's happening now. The investigative arm for the Civilian Oversight Commission is the Inspector General and his staff. They have access to literally everything that we do in the organization. We have an MOU with them. They couldn't be happier with the level of access they get. The Civilian Oversight Commission are a tremendous group of people from all walks of life with different levels of expertise in a variety of fields. I greatly value what they bring to the table. Their insight, their suggestions are something I take very seriously. I don't see any need for subpoena power for them because they are not an investigative body. They get what they need through the Inspector General's office.
Time, sir, and 15 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, then again, here we are. The Civilian Oversight Commission and the members, they're the ones that are sponsoring and pushing for the ballot measure to obtain subpoena power for the Oversight Commission because they're not getting the information that they're asking from the sheriff. So you can't have it both ways. Either they're getting it or they're not getting it.
All right, moving on now. Brian, your question is for Sheriff McDonnell.
Yeah.
Do you want to follow up?
Yes,
sorry,
a quick
Marjorie.
follow-up. The commission, after significant public debate, urged that the department ground its drone program. The recommendation was ignored. How does that work for you?
Well, that is exactly one of the problems that happened when the sheriff just didn't bother with the Civilian Oversight Commission to use them in their capacity. Had he gone to them up front and said, hey, we have this technology, What do you folks think about it? These are the things I like to do with it. I like your concerns. And then when they're part of the people crafting the policy, they take ownership of it, and they're going to back it. And ultimately, they vote. I believe the vote was 5-4 against the drone policy. But I believe the drone policy actually does have important components, and that is life-saving, tactical issues where we have to look at something where it's much better to do it with a drone than somebody having to put their neck out and see something, or in inaccessible places like earthquakes and stuff like that. We're getting people in spots where we can't, it's unsafe for them. The drones serve a purpose. However, if you approach the Civilian Oversight Commission in the right order of events and have them participate in the process, you're going to have a lot more positive feedback in support of your policies than if you just wing and tell them, hey, here's your policy, take it or take it.
Thank you. Nobody's winging anything. The Civilian Oversight Commission was not impaneled when we made the decision and rolled out the program for the UASs. They are a tremendous tool, and we laid out very clearly when they were appropriate to be used and when they were not. And primarily it's used for tactical situations, situations involving the bomb squad, and search and rescue situations, particularly in our mountainous areas. Tremendous tool. It's a life-saving tool. I took very seriously their recommendations. However, I made my decision based on public safety. It would have been irresponsible to ground them.
All right, that was kind of off the clock, so if we're good there, we're going to move on. Brian, this is a question directed to Sheriff McDonnell.
The L.A. County jails are a dangerous environment and house many violent criminals and gang members. Employees are regularly having urine and feces thrown at them, and over 700 jail cell door locks are broken in just one of your jail facilities. What are your plans to prevent these assaults on the employees, and what steps will you take in the next 4 years to improve the safety in the jails?
Thank you. Great question, and I don't disagree that it is a very difficult, complex, and often dangerous environment, particularly Men's Central Jail, which has an antiquated layout, the tiered system. We have had way too many of our employees gassed. It's a horrific experience. We have worked with the DA's office to be able to get additional filings, and we have had those filings on those that have been involved in that dramatically increased from years prior. We've done what we can tactically so far. We still are looking for best practices throughout the nation as to what's being done elsewhere. Our people are doing a tremendous job under very, very difficult circumstances. We will continue to work with the experts in the field, our own people primarily, to be able to move forward and provide them with the equipment and the training necessary to make it as safe as we possibly can.
And 15 seconds. 30, sorry. I got ahead of myself.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to appoint someone to oversee our jail system who actually grew up and worked in the jail system at the line level and worked their way up. So they're familiar with the jail system. And they're not trying to make our jail system an extension of the California Department of Corrections. And that's just the start. We have a lack of training. We have a lack of decision-making. Everything that the deputy does, they have to wait for another person to make the decision for them, the supervisor, the line staff. And that is killing, and it's endangering the safety of our staff, both sworn and civilian. Every single year, the amount of assaults against staff keeps skyrocketing, getting higher and higher, and this gentleman has nothing to say about it.
He's got 15 seconds now.
Yeah, we have the best and the brightest that we have working in our custody environment. They do a tremendous job every day. If you were to talk to them, I think you'd get a different perspective. Certainly we have work to do. Certainly we need to replace the antiquated Men's Central Jail with a comprehensive correctional treatment facility. When you look at our population, 31% of our population are mentally ill, and we need to be able to provide a therapeutic environment for them, and we would eliminate a lot of these problems we're having.
All right, we're out of time on that one. The next round is to me, and this one goes to Lieutenant Villanueva. This is about the tattoos at the Compton station. The chair of the Civilian Oversight Commission says they're going to look into it because clicks can lead to the use of excessive force. Do you support the investigation, and do you have any concern about its impact on the deputy's right to self-expression?
Deputies have a right to self-expression. That's grounded in the First Amendment, and as an employer, we cannot take that away from them. Our concern comes from when that expression gravitates towards something that is damaging to the community, damaging to the department, and undermines morale. A lot of times when you have subcultures or so-called cliques within any organization, it always points to a lack of morale. a very serious moral problem. And that's when these problems tend to fester, and they express themselves in ways like these so-called tattoos. I grew up within the organization. I've seen many individuals with tattoos. I work with people with tattoos in different stations, and they were the most honorable, ethical people I've ever worked with. And there was never a single problem with them. The question is, or the problem is, when that goes into illegal activities such as the Vikings and Linwood back in the 1980s. That is a prime example when things go wrong. We have to be mindful of it. However, we can't prohibit it or do anything that damages it. When we remove all the symbols of the organization, even the lawful ones that are well entrenched in the history and the traditions of the organization for some, I don't know where that came from, but guess what? People took offense to that within the organization because they lost their unit logo, their station identity. They had nothing to do with anything. A simple boot and a helmet on top of it. And that was considered banned under this administration. Those are the things that don't make sense. They undermine morale, and they actually promote the rise of things in subcultures like that.
Time, sir. And Sheriff, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think if my competitor did a little research, he'd see that there's more to it than that. All of this is nuanced. We have retired probably a dozen logos throughout the organization in the last 4 years. No apologies for doing that, because we see what happens when you go to court and you're asked, you know, do you have a tattoo? You show the tattoo, it becomes Exhibit A, we write the check. Not only the liability issue to all of the members of our communities, but also the credibility of us as an organization. If we sanction tattoos that depict violence, racism, hatred, any of the things that all of us abhor, then where does that put us? We need to take a strong, firm stance on this, to be able to be very clear about who we are as an organization. We have attempted to do that. We have been in meetings for quite a long time in an effort to be able to do this so it's legally defensible.
Okay, so you have 15.
Well, for some members, a lot of members of the organization, it's kind of confusing when your own command staff has these very tattoos. What's up?
We can leave that as a rhetorical, or you'd like to respond? Let's go for it.
Yeah, weren't you the one who just said that some of the people with tattoos are the most honorable people you've ever worked with?
All right, we're going to move on now on that one. Marcel, your next question is for the sheriff. Can you just move? I think we can move around. Do you have any more? We've got a little extra time. This has been moving a little bit quicker than we'd like. Margie, would you like to jump in?
Thank you.
And the next question, the next round, goes to, well, now it'll go to the sheriff.
Okay, all right. What we're seeing is a lot of distrust for law enforcement in the various communities. We know that public safety depends on building trust. You've both had an opportunity to talk about SB 54, but one of the issues that I'd like to see addressed is what some communities see as avoiding racial profiling, i.e. driving while black. Distrust by members of the affected communities cause them to be unwilling to work with law enforcement to interrupt crime. The AB 953, the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, requires that the department begin, starting this month, collecting data on use of force and the race, gender, and ages of those stopped. How, Sheriff, will you use this data to develop interventions and policy changes to reduce or eliminate any apparent bias this data uncovers?
Thank you for the question. When you look at that particular bill, and what it asks for us is to stop a vehicle and then lay out what our perception is of the person in that car, not to ask them, but to figure out what criteria that they meet. And so we're in essence profiling people in order to be able to fill out the form. That's not something that I think ultimately that will last. When you stop a car at night and the windows are tinted, you don't know if there's 1 or 5 people in that car. and when you pull them over, then you get a chance to be able to see who's in the vehicle. So there are a lot of unintended consequences out of another well-intended bill that went forward there. But certainly any good information that comes out of it will incorporate into our training, into our policies, our procedures, and we'll take whatever benefit we can, from any form, and be able to make our organization better. But when you look at this one in particular, there are some major challenges to it. It is a significant amount of workload for the deputies in the field to be able to complete this when you look in the aggregate. So there are some challenges there. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some benefit out of it as well.
30 seconds.
Those forms, they take approximately 5 to 6 minutes per person who is detained to fill out, and they go into a separate file apart from the mobile digital computer form when you do a traffic stop and you have to put that in your log. So we're adding a significant amount of time per each traffic stop. And yes, I agree with the sheriff that it does have some unintended consequences in terms of the overall impact of the activities of people in the field. Question is, the information itself is revealed to what we do with it. Can we trust the person with the information? That's what it boils down to. It's a matter of trust. Unfortunately, in the Lancaster-Palmdale area, we had a consent decree with the federal government because we engaged in a pattern of practice of profiling, racial profiling, with the enforcement of Section 8 housing. And again, the incumbent's part of his command staff was one of the person who was in charge of overseeing that as it unfolded and the disaster occurred. So the public sees this as a problem of a lack of trust because the very same people that are part of the problem are part of the command staff.
So your response, Sheriff.
No, he's putting people into a category here who happen to be in a command position in a geographic part of the county, which encompasses 1,200 square miles, and holding them accountable for every detail of every deputy. Certainly they set the tone. Certainly there were things going on that we have rectified since then. The people that we're talking about, when I came into the organization, I made it very clear in my opening that everybody would get a fair look to what they brought to the table, and we'd be moving forward for those that were leaders, those that had an ability to be able to take us to the next level. And so we have done exactly that. There are people that you could point at and find something in their past that you want to be critical of. I looked at the overall person, and I couldn't be more proud of the command staff we have in place moving forward, as well as other deputies and professional staff we have throughout this organization. Thank you.
Brian, I think the next round is going to come to you. And your question is directed first to Lieutenant Villanueva.
POPA represents many non-sworn employees, including custody assistants and security officers. What are your thoughts about civilianizing the jail, and do you favor a career series for the non-sworn, similar to the bonus positions for deputy sheriffs?
I favor a career series because I want to give normal career progression to every single member of the Sheriff's Department. I don't want them to be held back for run into a wall or a ceiling artificially that we created. That is wrong, because then that inhibits performance and it lowers the morale overall. Part of that career progression should also be the ability to become sworn. We should not treat our employees who are actually in the process of trying to become sworn as second-class applicants and delay their process through the system and get hired as sworn and go to the academy only because it's financially convenient for us. That is dead wrong. We cannot be doing that. Also, I want to treat every member of the organization with the same set of rules. I'm going to elevate all the civilian staff to the same standard of protections of the Peace Officer Bill of Rights in terms of the disciplinary process. I think it's important. Every employee deserves a Bill of Rights and to be recognized for the hard work they do, and that goes along to solve that.
Sheriff, your response.
Thank you. Now, I'm also certainly in favor of a career series, an ability to be able to have a career progression that you can work toward to be the best you can, to be recognized and be promoted then within your specialized field. As far as civilianizing our custody environment, we have talked about that extensively. That's something I'm very willing to entertain further. But as we move forward, we do so with an MOU in place with our unions that lay out what the percentages are. We could work on that together. But I also look at the custody environment and how much that has changed, particularly since realignment in 2011. And we now have, people in custody who used to be, for the same offenses, in state prison.
That's your time, sir. You have 15 seconds.
Regarding the civilization of the entire jail system, we've had a balance that has worked for us for the last 50-plus years. I believe we'll maintain a healthy balance, and we'll consider that, but it is a changing environment. AB 109 has changed the entire composition of our jail system to more closely approximate that of the state prison.
All right, our next round, I'm going to take it, and then I think what we will have time for is, Marcel, you've got another question. That'll be an equal number of questions for our panelists, and then we'll go to our audience questions. Is everybody okay with that? Time-wise, I'm just watching the clock. But somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that. We've got tons of audience questions that have come in now. My question is directed to Sheriff McDonnell, and this is concerning AB 931, the use of force, changing California's penal code that describes justifiable homicide by a police officer, requiring now more de-escalation using time, distance, communications, and available resources when it's safe and reasonable. Do you support this measure, sir?
I do not, and I don't know of anyone in law enforcement who would. When you look at the split-second decisions that have to be made in the field by a deputy, by a police officer anywhere in the state of California, it's incredible what they have to go through in the follow-up investigation and the litigation that will result from that. When you look at what we do today, we focus on de-escalation critically. We look at training. We look at all of the things that we can in an effort to be able to avoid a use of force, particularly a deadly use of force. So we have a lot in place now to be able to, throw out the current criteria of Graham versus Connor, which is the national standard established by the Supreme Court, where the decision must be reasonable, not necessary, as is trying to be written into the law. When you look at a use of force in hindsight, necessary would put officers and deputies in jeopardy that they would not otherwise be in, and I don't think it's fair to the public. It will have a chilling effect on law enforcement across the state.
And a rebuttal to that.
I believe the standard of Graham versus Connor has existed for decades, and it serves the community well. We need, however, a district attorney that is willing to prosecute when it is warranted, instead of sitting on their hands. That is where the problem lies, not so much in the policies of the department. AB 931 by Assemblywoman, I believe, Shirley Weber in San Diego, is bad policy. Good intentions, but bad policy, but it's going to really cause damage to actually people wanting to enter the profession. They'll say that is too much of a scary field. I don't want to get involved in something so risky.
Time, sir, and 15 seconds, sir.
I think it's been said.
All right. Marcel, your question goes to Lieutenant Villanueva.
Thank you. Lieutenant, how does your leadership style differ from our current sheriff, and what would you do differently to address the department's most pressing challenges?
Well, I don't think there could be a greater contrast in leadership styles. One, I care about the organization. I care about every single member of the organization. I've been in here for 32 years. I grew up literally within wearing the tan and green. I understand all the nuances of the organization, the trials and tribulations, doing more with less compared to your average police department. And I believe leadership should encourage, should inspire people to aim higher, and everybody comes working together. I don't believe in a management by gotcha. I don't believe in top-down, overwhelming bureaucracy where everybody's afraid to do their job and everybody's second-guessing each other. Right now, we have just it's a disaster that's going on. Not that I want to use the famous phrase of Mr. Trump, but that is the situation we have today, and it stems from a leadership style. And I grew up, and I faced a lot of adversity in the organization, and in spite of what the sheriff believes, I actually started my first reform effort when only 2 years on. I led the drive to ban smoking in the jail facilities. I led the drive to get corruption out of organized labor within the sheriff's department. I led the charge against Liebach and Paul Tanaka when they engaged in the pay-to-play politics. And I've had a long history of reform within the department. I understand where this department needs to go, and the leadership style is one that you have to respect the institution as a whole and treat it like you care about it.
If you'd like a rebuttal.
Thank you. I deeply care about the profession and our organization, which is a tremendous organization that's coming out of some very, very difficult times. My leadership style is one of inclusion, one to be able to find out what's going on and to be able to weigh all of the options we have as best we can, given the time that we have. When I look at what we've been able to accomplish in 4 years' time, I think it's incredible. We had comments by our monitor team on our consent decree, a very critical group, that we've seen a sea change in the jail environment on use of force issues and the relationship between our staff, custody staff and the inmate population. A sea change is a big term for that group to be able to validate us with. And so when I look at where we've been, where we're going, we are on the right track. We cannot go backward. And when I look at what my competitor brings to the table, I was a lieutenant. I made lieutenant 25 years ago, and I didn't know at that time what I didn't know. And I look back now on my opportunity, my privilege to be in so many different roles since that time, and what I've been able to take from each of those positions to the position I'm in today. I couldn't have been a success without that experience.
I'll give you a little more time on the clock, Mr. Villanueva. Go ahead.
To paraphrase Ronald Reagan, I will not use my opponent's lack of education or experience as a deputy sheriff against him.
All right, that's your response? All right, we've now come to the audience questions, and these are going to be a lightning round by agreement. These are 30-second responses. Some are directed at one candidate or the other. The first one, Sheriff, is for you. Okay. Some will go to both of you and give you both 30 seconds each to respond. But this is no rebuttal. This is just we're going back and forth on this one. Sheriff, according to, and I believe this should be a motion, by Hilda Solis and Sheila Kuehl 2 weeks ago, hate crimes have risen 24% during your term. Why?
Hate crimes have risen across the state, and we've seen that across the nation as well. They have not risen in the county of Los Angeles, in the area that we patrol, that we manage from a criminal justice standpoint. I've sat for probably 15 years now as the chair of the Anti-Defamation League's Law Enforcement Advisory Committee. We focus on hate crimes throughout the Southern California area. That's a great group, very committed to being able to wipe out hate, bigotry, and bias. I'm proud of that association. We work very hard and take hate crimes very seriously, and will continue to do so.
That's your time, sir. Lieutenant Villanueva, what do you think about releasing the Brady list of problematic deputies to the DA?
The Brady list is a fake list. It's a production of a compromised Internal Affairs, Internal Criminal Investigations Bureau list. It includes people that do not belong on the list, and it excludes people that should be on the list. And all it is a public relations stunt, nothing more. We need to actually reform the organization from the ground up, and that includes taking care of internal affairs and getting people that know how to do their job, know how to do proper investigations without interference from above, trying to dictate the outcomes because of their political affiliations, whether they like someone or don't like someone who's a subject of investigation. Once we have an internal...
That's your time. To both of you now, and Sheriff, we'll start with you. What steps do you plan on taking to diminish the separation of civilian versus sworn personnel?
You know what? We started that when I first came into the organization. It is a work in progress, but treating everybody with dignity and respect, respecting them for the job that they do. We're in a very, very complex work environment, and every part of that organization has to work well and together for us to be successful. When I look at our organization, and unlike any other I've ever seen in the United States, we have, you know, the largest of our kind of the function that we do with, similar to LAPD, but we do the jails, the courts, the colleges, the hospitals, the parks, search and rescue, and a third of MTA. Those would be specialized police departments anywhere else in the nation. We do them all.
And Lieutenant, you have a chance to respond to the same question.
Could you repeat the question?
It is, what steps do you plan on taking to diminish the separation of civilian versus sworn personnel?
Well, first, you got to care about them. You got to care about each and every one of them. You got to care about their careers, their families, their lives. And notice my opponent, he mentioned he cared about the profession, he cared about the organization, but he somehow forgot to mention that he cared about the people that work for the organization. That is a big difference between him and I.
All right, the next question is to you. In a time when gun violence is out of control, why do you support increasing gun permits?
The gun permits I support has to be common sense, has to be based on the law. And currently, The standard is not shall issue, as some people are demanding, but based on good cause. I intend to give those CCW permits to the people who merit it because of their particular situation where they are exposed to a threat. We do not have the availability of basically babysitting them 24/7. There are professions that by their very nature of their profession deserve that. That would include judges, district attorneys, people that are involved in the criminal justice system in a conflict way. In a call, that also includes reserve peace officers. H.R. 218 pretty much establishes that, but my opponent believes that every single reserve peace officer has to apply for a CCW permit.
That's your time, sir. And we have another question that'll come up for the sheriff on that, but I guess I'm just going to take these in order. Sheriff, why do you feel the need to exert pressure at civil service to uphold baseless terminations of deputy sheriffs?
We don't do that. So, I mean, that's I don't know how to answer something we don't do.
They call that a loaded question.
Yeah.
And we'll move on to Lieutenant. While you were actively employed at LASD, did you exhaust all resources to expose the corruption in LASD you saw, taking it to outside sources such as news media, California DOJ, et cetera?
As a matter of fact, I did. I went to investigative agencies. I went to the Office of Inspector General. I went to the LA Times. The entire pay-to-play scandal, I hand-delivered it with all the documentation and the Office of Independent Review, my bad. They said, oh, thank you very much for the information, kind of patted me on the head, and they said, we'll get back to you. That was 2006, 2007. Still waiting for them to get back to me on that one.
Sheriff, next question for you. How have you improved accountability at the department?
Oh, God, I could go into so many different ways, from setting the tone right in the very beginning as to what our expectations were for behavior and performance throughout the organization, for having positive and negative discipline consistent with those expectations throughout the organization. That has not always been popular, as you've heard, but something that we needed to do as an organization to be able to move past problems and to be able to, like I mentioned in the beginning, restore the shine to the badge. And we have done that. In 4 years, well, within the profession, the LASD is once again on the top of its game. In the communities that we serve, LASD is once again credible and is trusted by the people that we have the privilege to serve.
We have a request. Brian's asking, and he's got a privilege for a follow-up in the conversation on CCW's concealed carry permits. You had one.
This question is for both of you. Would you support CCWs for your non-sworn, your custody assistants who work in a very dangerous environment, as well as your security officers who are out in the field facing criminals every day? Will you support CCWs for them?
I will.
And we'll look at each one. We'll look at the situation overall in the macro sense and talk with you on that. And if you can make the case that that's an appropriate issue to deal with, we will. On an individual cases, currently, we would do that. If somebody has the need for one, we would see if the cause was there to be able to do it.
Translation, he's not issuing them.
All right. Okay. The next question, Lieutenant, is for you. And we're going to get pretty close to wrapping up, I think, unless some more questions come in. Some of these that have come in we've already asked and answered. But, Lieutenant, this question for you. With your limited experience, not even having run a station, how do you expect to run the largest sheriff's department in the country?
Oh, we know where that question came from. I will tell you this race is not about experience in management. I'm standing next to a man who's a career bureaucrat. He's been carpetbagging from ivory tower to ivory tower. And he claims to know more about this organization in 3 or 4 years than I have done with 32 years working it from the ground up in every single position, the tough positions, the positions that people working to this very day. People in broken down black and whites with no air conditioning. People in the high desert suffering under Class A uniform that's now twice as heavy, by the way, and hotter. They put the air conditioning duct into their Class A just to cool down. That is not known in your organization if you know what these people go through. But you have a $100,000 Yukon with nice air conditioning and twin TVs, I understand, I've been told. And you know what? My leadership style is whatever the deputies go through, I will be going through it. I came through the military training officer candidate school, and I learned early on, you are the last person in the line. You work to serve the people that are doing the job,
That's
not
your
the other way
time,
around.
sir. That went about a minute. So, Sheriff, I'm gonna take the time on the clock and give you a minute if you would like to respond on that.
That sounds good. That's not the reputation I have heard about you throughout your time. If you have 32 years of experience and you're doing the same thing every day for 32 years, that's not a lot of varied experience to be able to bring to the most complex organization in American policing. You were a watch commander in one of our stations. A watch commander in a station that size supervises about 18 people on average. You're going from 18 to 18,000. It is a different job. Lieutenant's job is a critical job in the organization, but it's a different job. And not to have sat in the seats as a captain, as a commander, as a chief, as an assistant sheriff, as an undersheriff, there's 6 levels there that you're missing. In each one of those levels, you get a tremendous amount of insight and experience. When you look at what we're asking of somebody to come in, you got to be able to hit the ground on day one. This is not a place to learn the job. What we do is much too important, much too critical to the lives of over 10 million people to take this as an on-the-job learning experience, which is what you would have to do with your background.
And that's our time on the questions. Applause might be appropriate here, because at this time, we're going to go into a final minute each for closing. And as per the coin toss at the beginning of this will start with Sheriff McDonnell for 1 minute.
Oh, finish with me.
No,
Finish up.
no, Lieutenant,
No,
you opted to
go last.
go last.
Okay,
right.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, contrary to what you've heard tonight from my opponent, I do love this profession, and this department is made up of the people that are within it. On the immigration issue, I am the son of immigrants. My parents came to this country a year before I was born from Ireland. We didn't have very much. We lived down in Boston, down the street from Fenway Park, and we made the best we could, but they instilled in me the value of hard work and treating people well and doing the very best you can. So I'm very sensitive to the needs of our immigrant community. What you've tried to paint is divisive. We won't have that. We'll move forward and be truthful. We are making history today in the LASD. Tremendous progress. We've got become the place to go for police organizations across America and around the world, and that's a great honor, but also a great challenge for us and a great privilege. Our human trafficking function has been looked upon and examined by a panel at Harvard University. They've done a write-up on what we've been able to accomplish with that. Congress, we've gone before them on 21st century policing for both gangs and human trafficking topics, as well as dealing with the mentally ill in the field and in the custody environment. Professional publications seek us out on emerging crime trends, including cybercrime, cyber terrorism, the fentanyl scourge that we're starting to deal with here.
Sheriff, that's our time.
Okay, if I could just, qualifications matter and experience count. Thank you for your support.
All right. We'll give you the extra time too, Lieutenant. You opted to go last. Your turn.
Well, I want to thank everyone for attending, for listening, and this has been a wonderful experience, and hopefully the sheriff will decide to do more debates because we have a lot more to talk about. This election is about change. It's about reform. It's about leadership. My opponent will want you to believe it's about experience, but that experience didn't matter at all. First thing he did coming into office was decide to make all of the previous corrupt foot soldiers of the previous administration his command staff. The pass he decided to give, or the clean slate, 95% plus of the organization doesn't need a clean slate. They've been doing an honest job their entire career. They needed anybody to clean anything for them. You somehow find a way to have the people that least deserve the clean slate to put them in positions of power and authority to continue doing the same corrupt practices of the previous administration. And this is what all that experience got you: a gold or a brass buckle. That is what the whole thing boiled down to. We need more than this in Los Angeles County. We need true reform, and that reform is going to happen on November 6th. Thank you all.
Lieutenant Villanueva, Sheriff McDonnell, thank you.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown. Click the ABC7 logo to subscribe to our Eyewitness News YouTube channel.